All right, this is the Family Pictures Podcast.
Padcast. We're from Boston.
We were talking about Matt Damon too much.
Exactly.
How about them apples? I mean, I lived in Boston for a number of years, and I worked for a moving company. And I swear, my favorite, there are some really dense. I worked in the fucking this and fucking that. It was pretty. I experienced that accent really closely for a long period of time.
As a New Yorker, it sounds like a fake accent to me. It's like you almost have it down. You can't deal with the A. That's the problem. Your A is gone. You almost have the New York accent, but the A is gone.
Yeah. You New Yorkers.
How can you respect Boston as a New Yorker? It's hard.
I know. But you look at the sports and then you weep. In
the
21st seconds.
2004. Before 2004, it was awesome.
Basically before the 21st century, yes.
I joke, and this is related to the podcast. My son was born October 28th, 2004. And that was when the Yankees essentially, had botched their 3-0 lead. To the
Diamondbacks,
Boston had come back. Yeah.
Oh no! The playoffs.
Boston came back, won the playoffs, go on to break the curse of the Bambino, and my son is born. And I'm like, oh shit, man, you might have the curse of the Bambino now, because it had nowhere to go. It might have gone to my son.
Curse.
Exactly. Anyway,
okay. So we are here to do Weapons Reloaded because our 32nd episode, we were so excited about Weapons. We did this back in the end of August to do this film. And Jim was on vacation and I forgot. I was also in a spot where I didn't have my proper audio equipment. And I think nobody listened to it because the audio was so bad. Plus, we get to do our... But we also get to do a picture for the first time for the second time,
right.
which I kind of think is kind of fun. So Weapons is the... Oh gosh, I am so unprepared. We were talking about too many other things at the same time right before this. Okay, it's a 2025 film directed and written by Zach Krieger, and this is his sophomore film after his breakout film from 2022 called Barbarian. And I was listening to another, so I did get to learn new things. He was writing this script while the edit for Barbarians was happening, and it was a really tough time for him because his good friend Moore, who was a partner in his comedy troupe, were Too White, or I can't remember the name of the comedy troupe.
The Whitest Kids You Know.
The Whitest Kids You Know had died tragically, and it started as an exercise of like writing as therapy, and it slowly turned into actually the script of Weapons. And interestingly, with the success of 2022's Barbarian, this film there was a bidding war for this script. And, we had talked about in that first podcast how this film has like Jordan Peele vibes.
Yeah.
Well, Jordan Peele's production company, he saw this, read the script, and he had actually unsuccessfully had his company, Monkey Paw Productions, lose to Warner Brothers for it. So some of the things, it's been fun to learn about the film since then. But you tell me, what do you think? Why are we redoing this?
I don't know. I think it was actually, I liked our discussion the first time, but the thing that was nice about it is 2025 for me personally, and I can't speak because I didn't see every film came out, far from it, but it was a good year for film. And Weapons was like, I went and saw it with my kids. So my sysadmin at Reclaim Hosting, Chris Blankenship, who's awesome, was like, this is the film I've been waiting for forever. I love these guys. He followed the script. I mean, them as sketch comics. And he knew about Trevor Moore and his death. And he's like, this is going to be a great film. I'm really excited. He was talking it up in our Slack channel. So I was like, okay, it's playing in Italy, version like original, as they say, VO, which means original English language. I'm going to take my sons to see it. Had no idea what to expect. I go, the theater is full, which happens a lot in 2025 for several films I've been to. And the experience was just jaw-dropping. I just thought it was amazing. It was brilliantly executed. I loved the narrative devices. And it was just really special. And I think in that first podcast we did, one of the things I came away with and talked about was, just how happy I was to sit in the theater with my kids and watch a really what I think is a great film. And it's a film that we went back when we went to Portland during that trip you're talking about, saw
Yeah.
not only my whole family, but with friends' family. So there was like 10 of us who went. And this is months later, and the theater was still packed in Portland. It was playing in like 4 or 5 theaters around
Yeah.
Portland. I was like, wow, like this movie hit a nerve, and it hit a nerve for a lot of different reasons we'll talk
Right.
about. But for me, that
Yes.
was it. Like this seemed like a film of its moment. And in fact, it wasn't the only one of 2025. Just a few short months later, one battle after another comes out. And I
Yep.
was like, oh my gosh, this is another film of its moment. So I kind of like redoing it because I think 2025 in particular, Weapons and One Battle After Another were real kind of like, storytelling highlights for me in 2025.
Yeah. So, I mean, on the production note side, I mean, it definitely was a heater. Like in terms of like it just like started and word of mouth, classic word of mouth picture that people started going to. One battle after another was, it's Leo, it's Paul Thomas Anderson. So that was a different kind of movie from a commercial perspective. Um, this one found people, and that's what's exciting. I like those kind of movies. Like that's it. Those are movies. It reminds me of the '80s. I think even like that reminds me of like Raiders of the Lost Ark. That was like a movie that like it's like, oh, it's an adventure movie. I don't know. And then you go and see it with a friend, and you walk out of there as like a 10-year-old, and you're like, holy shit, that was the
Yeah.
best thing ever.
That was absolutely my experience with Raiders of the Lost Ark. I was like,
Yeah.
holy shit. And I stayed and watched it again. Like I didn't even leave. I was like, I have to see that movie again.
So this had rekindled some of that like kind of experience, of movie going. I didn't get to see Weapons in the theater, sadly, like you did twice. And nor did I end up, I bought a ticket to One Battle After Another, and then life got in the way. I didn't get to see it in the theater either, which sucks. So my theater experience is I'm missing out on some of these things right
I
now.
saw
But
One Battle After Another in the theater twice, once in Italian. So I
yeah,
understood about 60% of it. And then I saw it the next time in English, and then I understood 80% of it. But the piece that was key there is that when I saw it the first time in Italian, it was on the IMAX. And that experience with
yeah,
that last car chase was
yeah.
so awesome.
I know. I'm an old total IMAX fiend right now. Yeah, I'm with you there. When it hits for the right film,
Oh,
it's just astounding. It's what makes going to the movies so worth it still, and among many other things. But it's being in a crowded theater is such an incredible experience. So I still love it to death when
speaking of
because it has the energy of something else that it's like nothing else.
Speaking of which, and then I'll stop. On that same trip to Portland where we saw Weapons in the theater, there's a great, and I want to give this a plug. The Hollywood Theater in Portland is kind of like the New Beverly in LA. It still shows, old school 35 millimeter prints and other things, but mainly the 35 millimeter prints. I
Mm.
saw a 35 millimeter print with my entire family of Raiders of the Lost Ark in an
No,
entirely sold out theater. Like
I bet.
everyone was like all together and all of Portland seemed to be there. And like it was amazing, like going
Yeah,
through the rolling ball again and
yeah,
the whole it was just so great. So anyway,
yeah.
that was another bit of that Portland experience. And Portland's a great movie town, man. It is got it's just that theater is the world to me. I think it's so amazing. My friend recently went to see The Brood there.
Yeah. Okay. Oh, right, right. Yeah, I saw a chat about that. That's true. Yeah. I mean, those, mine in the Boston area was what is it? Not Kendall Square. I saw like Planet of the Apes in the movie theater, and it was amazing.
Yeah.
Just to see I mean, one of my favorite science fiction films from when I was a little kid. To see it in the big picture, and in this person I was dating at the time, she's like, "What the fuck's this? Like, why do you like this bullshit?" You know, 'cause she was an art student, and I was like, "It's fucking, you know, it's just amazing when you see that." And everybody else was like, "Yeah," you know,
Exactly. Get your hands off me, you damn dirty ape.
yeah,
I'll tell
it's the
you,
best.
and we're going to go far afield, so I'm going to stop this right now. Eddie Murphy in his, stand-up comedian Cars thing with Jerry Seinfeld talks about
Uh-huh.
the impact the Planet of the Apes series had on him, and he went to the Hempstead Theater and watched them all. And he talked about doing this as a kid, and that's where I grew up.
Mm,
So that was really cool to think of Eddie Murphy at Hempstead watching the Planet of the Apes. I don't know why that
yeah,
sticks with me, but it does.
yeah. So, okay, so we're actually supposed to be talking about weapons here, and let's finish off some of the production stuff
Yes.
because it's
Okay.
interesting. Because like Krieger's pretty darn cool. I listened to another interview with him. I was listening because it happened. He was doing he was reading his own letterbox reviews, and he just seems like a pretty great guy, just for a gimmick for letterboxed. And I was like, oh, that's pretty awesome. And so he talked about, number one, as I already described, that he wrote this, dealing with his one of his best friends tragically dying. But he also brought up in another interview, which we had brought up it was called the podcast on the left, which it was basically a bunch of horror slash comedy friends that he knew, and it was pretty recently after the film was released, and he was talking about like this is in part a story about living with abuse, and he had a father who was an alcoholic, and you go to school and you come back, and there was to be a scary dad at home, and so there's that story in here too. But I don't know. I mean, what I think watching this again, some of the things that came out and now that we're doing it again is that story. So there's the obvious story, right? That this is the allegory, or that this is focusing on, is like the family trauma of losing, someone, and in particular losing kids. And we talked about, Sandy Hook is the obvious, like you have 17 kids missing from an elementary school. My mind immediately goes to 2012, and the story of 20 children being murdered in an elementary school. And so there's that. And I think that's important because the first character, and even though he's not the first one presented, that kind of comes to mind, is obviously Archer Graff, right?
Let me ask you something.
Yeah.
You know that Archer Graff's kid Matthew has the Fury Road poster on the wall, right?
Okay. I don't remember that, but yeah, I believe
It
you.
does. The original one with Tom Hardy and Charlize Theron. That's
Right.
2015 that movie came out. Do you think there's a way you can time this movie? Like maybe it's kind of dealing not that far off from Sandy Hook. Like maybe it actually does place itself 10 years, in the past. Like, because you don't know when it is. It seems like current day.
No.
That
Yeah,
makes
sure.
sense, right? But I wonder, like, anyway, again, not
I mean,
useful,
he definitely,
but
I mean, he's a 15-year-old. The boy is, how old is he? He's like in the, he's there. You get a sense that he's probably what, like 11, right? Would you guess, or 10?
which is how
That's
old
the age
my
of
son
kids.
would have been when Fury Road came out,
And
roughly.
you let him watch it, right?
I did, yeah. And it was his favorite movie. And
Yeah,
that's
no, I
why
could see.
I see it like Matthew and my
Yeah,
son. You know what I mean?
right. No, so it can't be the present because he was not be watching this film when he was 4.
Exactly.
So
And,
so
not
yes,
useful at all. I'm sorry.
no, I mean Archer Graff, he's like the real American contractor character. Like he's our proxy for a man's man that's going to solve problems, and he's incredibly played by Josh Brolin. Josh Brolin just like swinging and swinging. He's hitting doubles and triples and home runs and everything he does basically. Um,
Agreed.
and he he's the character that kind of is the proxy for what like families enduring tragedy, right? Because we get the setup of the film, and we're skipping a chapter. We're going to go back because I want to talk about Justine as the teacher, and that was something new as well that we kind of talked about
Sure.
in our 2025 award show. And I was like, "Ooh, we got to make sure we talk about this time." So the setup which is so wonderful. It's basically a child telling us the story of a community that had something happen, but you'll never know because everybody's covered it up and a lot of people died and everybody's trying to pretend it didn't happen. But here's the real story, right?
Yeah.
And it's such an incredibly, terrifying setup because it's in the voice of a 10-year-old boy, basically telling us like, and that's not a what are good there's good examples of movies where it's the kids that know and the parents are ignoring, like the kids are the truth tellers ultimately,
Yeah,
right?
totally.
And it's the parents that are the ones that are hiding in their shame or hiding behind, their the failings of their families and relationships. And so we have this setup, and we are introduced to Archer Graff during Justine's chapter, but Archer Graff gets his own chapter, and the chapterization of the characters is part of the narrative structure you're talking about that's so compelling, like because it does this jumping back and forth through time a little bit, but slowly but surely advancing the story and seeing it through someone else's point of view. And Archer, he's, fucking up his job. He's living in his kid's, bed, reliving, wakes up every day to look at his ring cam of his kid just literally flying out the door with his arms spread because he's enchanted by the witch, which we later learn about. And his wife is like, I'm leaving, and so his family is clearly fractured due
Yeah.
to this.
That whole thing
And
you hear about, like, a couple not being able to survive the loss of one of their children,
oh,
right? Like, you could
yeah.
see it in that picture for sure.
Right. Yeah. And so he badly, badly wants to solve the problem, and he won't give up. We see him going back to the police station and talking to the police chiefs, and the police are like, we're on it, we're doing it. And he's like obsessed over Justine, the teacher, who's the teacher of the classroom where the 17 children, only that one classroom that they disappeared from. And he is the embodiment of our, like, what you're describing, like the impossibility of trying to imagine what it would be like to lose a child.
And on second watch, right? I don't know, it's got to be my fourth watch of this movie.
Yeah, right. Me too.
One of the things that comes out, as Archer's story progresses is, a certain amount of, coldness. There's coldness at the point with the police station where the chief is just kind of saying, look, we have thought about that. We have looked into that. Yours isn't the only kid, right? There's other kids. And then there's another
Mhm.
police officer as Archer's out there or as he leaves who says, what does this guy think? That's the only thing we work on or whatever. Like, there's a
Yeah.
certain sense of like, what a pain in the ass this guy who just lost his kid inexplicably
Right.
is to us, as they're
Mhm.
drinking coffee around the thing because it hadn't happened to them. And that kind of hits home when he goes to another parent or another family that has lost one of their kids in that classroom. And he's looking to kind of do his investigative work. And even there, while, the mother or the woman he kind of accosts to say, hey, can I see a copy of the film you all have? Because I want to compare notes. And she's like, no, I'm not comfortable with that. And there's this sense in that community of a certain amount of distance and
Yeah.
isolation, as we talked about in our first episode, that's real and comes
Yeah.
home at that moment when he's trying to reach out to actually figure out what the hell happened.
Yeah. Suburban, like, disconnection and discontinuity, right? This idea that they show up in a PT meeting together just to yell and scream, because that's part of Justine's story. Yet they clearly haven't spoken to one another outside of it. And part of it's understandable because of the tragedy of it all, but it's not like I mean, as we're both parents, listeners, that one of the funniest things about being a parent when you have kids in grade school is you have all these shotgun relationships with the parents of your kids' friends, right? And it's like dating almost. You're like, hey, like, because you go to the birthday party, because is this a chaperone birthday party or is it not a chaperone birthday?
Do
It's
I
like,
have
do I
to
have to
go?
stand? Do I have to go or do I
Exactly.
not have to go? And for us, thankfully, so many of them just occurred in like Prospect Park, so you can kind of linger on the edges. You're not trapped in someone's living room, or New York City apartment, which would be insanely small. So, but the idea is like, yeah, it is kind of awkward that the parents are presented as not having had any sort of relationships with one another, and as you described with that one, and it's only through the husband that he finally gets access to the video, and he makes his little triangulation, which becomes important later on in the story. And he circles this area where it's like, okay, since I have two pathways towards a spot, this is approximately the area our kids were heading toward. Meanwhile, like, you don't get a sense like even the police figured out that most basic
Exactly.
aspect.
Yeah, I mean, it's just complete incompetence on that part, right? Almost incompetence to the point of,
Yeah.
as the 10-year-old at the beginning suggests, cover up, right? Like, there
Hmm.
seems to be like no will, and one person who has one will and can break out of the isolation of the moment to say, let's think logically about what happened here. Because there's that scene when he's watching that, and it's one of the scenes I liked a lot this time around, where the father lets him watch it, and then he's saying, "Stop, go back, stop, go back," and the father's like, "This is kind of hard," and Archer's just like not having it. Like, he's
No.
locked in. Like, he
Yeah.
wants to figure out what happened. Like, his
Right.
grief has been driving him crazy, and now he
Yeah.
needs answers, and he gets them nowhere else. And I really love that about Archer's character, and he is a
Yeah.
really compelling character that brings us to the end of his story, and also kind of starts to get the ball rolling on what is a kind of crazy, crazy roller coaster for the
Yeah.
next, hour and a half.
Right. And he also, there's this in his chapter, he after I think it's after he's gotten this data, like he's produced, he ends up back in his son's bed, and he falls asleep, and he has this dream. And this dream is this is where the enchantment of his child somehow enters his dream state. Effectively, we learn later. I love that there's no
Yeah.
explanation of the logic of everything, and that I think that makes this movie wonderful. Like, there's not like, oh, here's the mechanics behind the curtain of how this stuff works. It doesn't matter. Like, it's
Yeah.
just so
That
it's
will be
complete.
worked out in Weapons 2.
Yeah. Oh, God, they do a sequel because they're like, well, you'll make a lot of money. Anyway, so what happens is, so he sees his son in his dream, and he chases him out the front door, and he goes to this, and there's this weird, emanation of a assault weapon above this house, and that's like, people are like, what does that mean, what's that about? And Krieger's like saying, I don't know, man. Like, he does push back against readings of the film, and like as being an explainer himself, which is understandable as the artist behind it. It's like it speaks to him for that moment, and it's kind of like David Lynchian, like the weapon above there, what does that mean? And that um but anyway, he goes into the house, and what's important is he finds his son in the bed, and but his son's catatonic, and he gives this speech to him. And this is like the classic, and I mentioned this in the 2025 awards. Is like this idea of all the things I should have said to you, and so this is where it alludes to. It seems like, obviously, it's not surprising that any parent wouldn't have regrets, but his particular regrets are, he seems to have been a bit of maybe an emotionally withholding parent. Like, it's like, I felt it. That's what he says, but I never said it.
Yeah. And it's also the scene in this story where he's looking at his son in bed, he's doing this, and then
Yeah.
turns around, it's Gladys, and it's a fucking jump scene. And
Yeah.
he
Yeah.
wakes
Jump
up
scare.
from this dream, and he's like, what the fuck? And it's one of the
It's so
better what
funny.
the fucks, because every episode has a what the fuck moment where the character is just like, what the fuck? And this is probably one of the best. I think Justine
Oh,
has a great one too, but
yeah. Yeah, Krieger talked about, in listening to the one of the podcasts. He talked about how it was something they worked out on set. The line, it was his idea, but he's talking about, because it's kind of it's the audience is what the fuck. The audience is like, what
yeah.
the fuck, like when they see Gladys, but then he kind of, he personifies for us like our feelings, like, what the, and he said they did multiple takes, and the loud angry one seemed to be the best one. They're like, that's
Oh,
it, you got it.
that was
It's
it.
so
It was so
yeah.
good.
Yeah. So we do have to back up. So this is, I mean, that's the classical story of the parents that are trying to rationalize and try to understand, and what's the answer. And that's kind of, they're looking, what's the solution to this problem? Literally, to find your child, which typically is impossible when they've been murdered, or if they're more likely a missing child, as in this case, you can see this as a simple missing child, an abduction story, even though it's not exactly that. But the other one that kind of came up that I thought was really interesting that we hadn't really talked about in this way, was the idea of Justine's story. And we'll go. So Justine is the primary character. Her chapter is first because she's the teacher of this classroom that has 17 of 18 students missing, and the only one remaining is Alex. And so this is the target of the parents and Archer in particular, of like their ire. It's like, it's her fault. She's not telling us what's going on. She knows something. And that's the classic. And this is what we were talking about, like the scapegoating of teachers of your children's problems. Right. And we talked a bit, and I want you to talk about this, the idea of the relationship between teachers in a community and your children. And maybe, I mean, I think for you, it's been very different too with your kids in Italy.
Well, yeah, I mean, Justine is a character upon several watches that I just think, I love Josh Brolin's character. I love Archer, and he is kind of in some ways
Mhm.
the protagonist. But Justine, I fight between the two of them, not to mention all the others who are so great. But like, Justine's so great because here she is you see her as a teacher, you see her as being scapegoated by the community, and then immediately she's at the liquor store,
I know.
like falling up, like getting up, and
Yeah.
kind of also as she gets back in, you get the sense that she might be being kind of, I don't know, harassed. And it turns out it's Archer who's harassing her, and she
Yeah.
has a what the fuck with when she goes out and someone knocks on her door, and you have that whole scene
Bangs
and
on
then
her door.
nothing
Yeah.
exactly, and then
Yeah.
she's like, what the fuck? She goes out, there's nothing except witch is painted on her car. But beyond that, she becomes this really persistent figure because after it happened, she wants to like know what the hell happened, just like everyone
Right.
else in the town, even though not one of her kids literally biologically disappeared. Arguably,
Mhm.
17 kids under her kind of care and custody in some ways have disappeared. She's
Right.
being blamed. And I think that's where she gets really great because this figure as teacher kind of comes in, and teachers have become, in some ways, scapegoats of the problems in America, right? They've also been systematically defunded. They've been kind of seen as, you're not tough enough, you should be carrying a gun if you're going to be dealing with these shootings. Like,
Yeah.
they have just been asked to do the impossible. And I believe teaching is like the most honorable and the most kind of essential important job one can have and one can do, particularly when you're talking about public school. And I think that, this scene, this whole sequence, and Justine's character kind of in some ways for me on second watching or third watching, fourth watching, is a redemption of that role, because there's a
Yeah.
particular moment when Marcus, who's the principal, is talking with Justine and basically says to her, and I'll paraphrase, like, you're not their parent, Justine. You're just a teacher. Right. And I,
Right.
I don't know what
Mhm.
exactly the phrasing is. And I
It's,
think
you aren't a parent, you're a teacher. Yeah.
you're a teacher. And essentially, there is a real kind of tension in this film and in this kind of, for me, in this kind of avocation versus all these parents, like, who could give two shits in some ways, versus a teacher who is really interested and kind of invested in Alex's well-being, to the point where she refuses to follow, the kind of commands in some ways
Right.
of the principal, and actually follows Alex home and confronts him. And she's the one who figures out, like, something is wrong,
Right.
something's rotten in Denmark. And she's the one, alongside Archer, the only two people in this film so far that get off their ass to do something.
Yeah, and she's that conversation with the principal Marcus, and we should mention, like, the Justine character is played by Julia Garner, and
Who's
Marcus is played by
great.
Bennett.
I
Oh yeah,
love her
and
in this.
yeah, she was famous, mostly known for Ozark. She was also briefly in The Americans. She had some, like, her TV moments were quite high, and I hope she keeps going into more pictures because she's fucking great. And so Yeah, that conversation with Benedict Wong, and it's really interesting because this is just the first half of a conversation. Because
Yeah,
when she finally visits, so the first conversation is in the school where she's pleading her case, like this isn't right. I want to talk to. She's like, and she's saying like there's, and he bring she's saying that he's the last one. I need, we're the last ones. Like, why did we get saved? And so she wants to figure it out, and he's imposing on her. It's like, well, you're making it too much about you. Alex has been too much. And then he mentions she has a history, right,
yeah,
of being too close. And she has this great quote. She's like, I hugged a crying little boy, lock me up, right? Like, fuck you.
exactly.
It's like, and then he's like, well, you drove a kid home. It's like her parents didn't show up. He lived close by. Am I going to just leave him there? And it's this line that it's an artificial one. And he just keeps saying it's not appropriate. Right.
Yeah,
And, but she won't let it go, even though he implores her to. And as you described, she follows Alex home. He goes into the door. She tries to knock and no one answers. And she's rumbling. She eventually goes in the backyard and sees the catatonic parents on the couch and freaks out. And so she calls Marcus again. And Marcus is like, oh my God, what are you doing? I'm going to pretend you didn't call. And this is really important. And she's so frustrated and walks away. In this, we only realize, we learn later when we get to Marcus's chapter, this is only the first half of the telephone call.
yeah. The second half. Are we going to talk about that now?
We can, if you want. Yeah.
Well, I think the second half is important because Justine's smart, and she
Yeah.
basically pushes Marcus's, you know, buttons by saying, like, Marcus, I am making a formal welfare complaint that you have to take seriously.
Yeah.
And
Because he's a mandatory reporter. Yeah.
and so she knows the law. She knows what he has to do if she does it. And she's so concerned, and rightfully so, given what she saw, that she's the one who kind of puts in motion pressure on the whole case, kind of alongside Archer, kind of trying to figure out like what's going on. All this in the background is and this is why I love her character so much. Whereas Archer's a little bit more one dimensional. At the same time, Justine is, showing up at a bar,
Yep.
sending texts to an old fling cop and trying, as you
He's got
said,
a girlfriend
exactly.
who
He's got a wife.
denies it as soon as he walks in the bar, though, which is
Oh
really
my
fucked up.
God. Exactly. Says, yeah, things between me and her are not good right now. But
Like,
essentially,
what?
she knows he's on the wagon. She's pushing him to
Yeah.
get drunk so that they can
Yep.
go home together. And he's basically like, lay off of us, Justine. Like, we're doing the best I can. This is the cop, Paul.
Paul.
This is his
Yeah.
figure. As she's driving him home on that kind of drive of shame where he's hung over and has to go back and face who he thinks his wife is out of town, but she's not. So he's in for a world of hurt. But after he does all that, and she's like, stop giving me shit. You're not doing anything. What are you guys doing? It's been a month and you haven't turned up shit.
Mhm.
She's like, we're
Yep.
working on it, but whatever. He gets out of the car and she's like, suck my dick. And it's like,
So
that
good.
is the best line. I just think she is just a wonderful character. And
Yeah.
like in her complexity of doing amazing things for these
Mhm.
kids and truly being someone who's got their interest at mind and welfare rather than being the witch she's being proposed to. She's actually one of the few people. And the highlight for this film for me is when Archer and her finally get on the same path together. Right.
Yeah,
And
they get on the same page.
they finally kind of work
Yeah.
together to figure it out. It's a beautiful development in all these stories.
Yeah, I mean, it also speaks to, in some ways, like the kind of the trope of the pushy woman, right? Like, I mean, you have the pushy dad, right, who's pushed back against by the police, like you're overreacting, but then you also get if you talk up, as a woman character, and it's like, I want you to calm down, and that's the thing.
Yeah.
It's like, that's the classic trope of women being told to calm down, right?
Yeah.
You're hysterical, and she's like, fuck you, suck my
Yeah.
dick, or
Exactly. She's
and to
great.
Marcus, he's like, no, you're not. And Marcus still wheedles out of it. He's like, no, how about if I talk to her? How about if I talk to, Alex's parents? How about if, I pretend, initially he's like saying, I pretend you didn't even call, but then he's finally pushed into the corner, and he has to say, is like, is that acceptable to you? Right.
Yeah.
The principal, Marcus,
And
has to
he's
say,
like, "Do you really wanna go there, Justine?"
yeah,
And she's like, "Yep, I really wanna go
I
there,
really do. And
Marcus."
that's, yeah, and she's fucking awesome for it.
Yeah,
So,
totally.
and so those are the two most important chapters other than Alex's chapter in the end. But in the middle, we have there's some craziness that goes on because Paul gets his own chapter, which we've already kind of talked about. I don't know if his chapter is super important.
I
It's just
love
more
Paul, though.
funny.
I think it's
Yeah.
funny. I think he's
Oh, and so is,
hysterical.
but their motivation, they're kind of tools of the cogs of this machine of the plot of like, how does this work? And because both Justine and Archer are visited by
So
the
Paul's
actual,
chapter, let's do a little math here.
yeah,
It's Justine, then Archer,
Archer,
and then
then
Paul,
Paul.
then
Yep.
Paul. Got it.
And
Okay.
and then James, who's the drug addict, and then Marcus. And Marcus obviously becomes really important because he's the unveiling
Yeah.
of how all this stuff works, how the horror works. And then we finish with Alex. But so, Paul is the ex-flame, as we've mentioned, and he gets his chapter for the sake of like kind of pointing out he actually does end up having sex, and he's just like a buffoon. He's so wonderful buffoon, and he gets this drug addict, James. He catches him trying to break into some sort of warehouse. He's just like looking for money, so something to sell so he can get his next fix, and he's failing to. But at the same time, it's not like he's an important character. It's more of this idea. But James, I think, is more interesting because he's just like outright funny. And this speaks to like Krieger's like background in comedy. And he's kind of like, because James is like a jester styled character ultimately.
Yeah. He's like, sir, I he's this complete tweaker,
Yeah.
heroin addict who's going around trying to open doors as he's talking to his sister on the phone, asking for money, to pay for a suit so he could get the good job that's going to allow him to pay back his mom. And it's just wonderful. And he opens up one of the doors, it's open, and he pulls out a Hello Kitty backpack
iPad.
with an iPad and headphones. It's just like, oh yeah, it is hysterical. He's
Yeah.
great.
And he ends up in the web in Alex's house, and he's the one who actually sees the kids in the basement for the first time. And so it's the motivation of the plot. Those two, they're the wheels of the engine, the plot more than anything. But Marcus is important because Marcus, we've kind of alluded to his role in Justine's like life. How Marcus is introduced in his home life is so wonderful, actually, because he's like, we get the second half of the phone call while he's shopping in the grocery store with his partner, and it immediately goes to his partner. He's making a tray of hot dogs. It's like 7 hot dogs and a bunch of chocolate chip cookies. And it's just like hilarious. 2 adult men eating total crap food.
And I think from what Chris Blankenship, who's the sysadmin who turned me on to this, that's a reference to a skit from The Whitest Kids You Know. So the hot dogs and the mustard, like that's a whole, like there is several inside jokes for those who are in the know and have followed them as sketch comics. There are definite inside jokes there. I don't get all of them because I didn't watch the sketch comedy. I've seen a couple episodes. It's hysterical, particularly the guy Trevor Moore is hysterical. But I couldn't speak to all of those episodes.
Right. And so this is important because we're finally introduced to Gladys. And Gladys comes to Marcus's office first at the request, because Justine had pushed on this. And Marcus is like, kind of like, where's Alex's parents? Alex's parents are supposed to be here, right? Because you're not the guardian. And she's like, oh, her dad has consumption.
Yeah, exactly. And he's like,
and she's
Marcus is great. He's like,
yeah. Isn't that from like colonial times? Isn't that,
do you mean tuberculosis?
Yeah, exactly. And so immediately he thinks Auntie Gladys is off. I mean, she looks off. She looks off. Yeah, she's something.
Even his secretary is like, won't stop staring at him. Like, the aunt is here, and she just stares at him dead stare. And he's like,
Yeah.
Well, let her in.
Yeah.
I
Yeah,
love
she's
that.
like she has the makeup of, like, Cindy Sherman in one of her, like, photographs of herself when she's trying to, really make herself look extreme, from those 70s and 80s photos. Anyway, so, yeah, what do we make of Gladys, right? Like, who is Gladys in this moment compared to who we get to know her to be?
Well, Gladys is, smart. She's the aunt who's come to town to on this in this framing, we understand her earlier as the aunt who comes to town because she's sick.
No, we don't know that until we do the Alex chapter, actually, it's last.
Oh, we
We
never
don't.
know that. That's
Yeah,
right. Yeah, I'm just
that's the thing I'm remembering. It's like, oh wait, we learn about Gladys in this really oblique way first through Marcus's perspective.
ah.
And
So she's the aunt who's coming to take care of the parents, particularly the son who has, she said, a stroke or something or
yeah.
consumption.
Yeah. And so Marcus's flags are up a little bit. His antenna is up a little bit, but he's not really freaking out. And it's at the hot dog scene when he's back home with his partner, in which suddenly Gladys comes to the house.
Yeah,
And this is where shit starts to really fall apart, right?
yeah,
Because this is the first real horror scene, and she does this whole ritual where she possesses Marcus, and we realize like Gladys is something, something, something. She's obviously we've seen her through these dreamlike moments, but now Gladys is here, and she's the nasty aunt, and this leads to Marcus being possessed and going after Justine, and that matters because that's where it comes across. It's where Archer's accidentally come across Justine at the gas station, and this is where they come together. And so that's important, but we can almost ignore that because what happens is we immediately go to right after this scene where like poor Marcus who's been possessed and is trying to kill Justine is run over by a car, and everybody's like, "What the fuck?
that
Get
is
him
so
up."
crazy. I was like that I was yelling at times in the theater, and my kids were like,
I bet you
"Stop,
were.
Dad!" And I was like, because I get into it, but when Marcus got hit, I was like, "Whoa!" And they were like, "Shut up, Dad! Shut up!" It was hysterical.
Yeah. Yeah. So they're starting to. What's cool is Archer though and Justine start to put things together, and that's what's important. So at the end of Marcus's chapter is the coming together of Archer and Justine, and he it's Archer, I think, that realizes like Marcus's posture. He has the arms out and he kind of puts that
That's
together,
right.
and then just he ends up showing the map of the neighborhood to Justine, and she's like, "That's where Alex's house is."
So it all comes together, and you
Right.
realize that that's going to be the final showdown between looks like Justine and Archer. And in fact, by this time, it's not only the parents who are on the couch catatonic, but James and Paul in James's episode have found their way to the house because James, to get out of certain death at Paul's shotgun, because James had once again stabbed Paul with needles, this time through the cheek. Anyway, you got to see it for that whole story. But the point being is, James is like, I know where the kids are. And Paul's like, bullshit, I'm gonna die. He's freaking out. He's so pissed. He's so pissed for a million reasons. Um,
Yeah.
and basically, finally, kind of listening to James is like, all right, show me where it is. And then they go to the house where, of course, they are, Alex's house. Paul knocks on the door, goes in, and hours later, and James is in the back of the car, like, come on, man. He's gonna take my, what is
Reward
guaranteeing me
money.
that you're gonna take my award money? Because there's a $50,000 award that James sees in the pawn shop. And that's why he tells him, let's go there. I'll split the reward with you, but I know this will be good for you, etc. And Paul comes out, he's turned by Gladys, and he grabs James. And so both James and Paul essentially are turned and also catatonic in the house until our protagonists, Justine and Archer arrive on scene. Does that get us to where
But
we need to be?
except for we have to back up, right?
Damn
Because
it.
Alex's point of view is about you're forgetting like this is kind of the other theme is this idea of
I always try
being
and be on point,
beholden
but I'm off
being
point.
beholden to, and this is something where you think we're going to explore in a whole series of like adult children or caretakers reconciling with their aging parents or family members, right?
Yeah.
Because we're introduced to Gladys through the eyes of Alex and his family, his mother and father, having to take on Gladys. Auntie Gladys is coming to stay with us. Auntie Gladys, my mother took, this is Alex's mother, my mother took care of her, it's my turn, so I'm going to take care of her. And Alex is kind of like freaked out. He's already, we learn also in Alex's story that he's kind of the picked on kid. He's the awkward kid. And so he's a little fragile. And so he's like, but you can see he's got a good relationship with his parents. And so but he doesn't want that invaded because it's kind of everything is, his space is very tenuous as a kid. And so, he's having a conversation with his dad and he's like, so how long is Gladys going to stay? And she's like, I don't know, man, maybe 6 months. I don't know.
It's like,
And,
I
and,
don't
and,
know, Axeman, but it could be a while. That's what families do for each other, Axeman.
yeah. In the meantime, like Alex has tried to spy on her and she's like creepy as fuck, right? It's like, she's literally creepy Treehouse, the thing you
Oh
don't want
my
to go up
God,
to.
without her wig. And like
Yeah.
there have been scenes like that brings me back. Like my mom went into a hospital for a while. My dad was nowhere to be found. And so my mom's mom came into town and brought
Ugh.
with her, because my mom's mom had a lot of money, brought with her help. And one of the help was this woman whose name was Sarah. And Sarah was a big black woman who worked for my grandma, and she didn't have any hair and she wore a wig. But at night, she would sleep without the wig, and we would
Oh my,
always sneak and look through the door, and there she would be without the wig. And we were like, oh shit. As kids, it was fucking crazy. So this reminds me of that directly, like, because that's
yeah.
horrific, for a kid.
Yeah, and it's just, strangers in your house when you're little that are staying there for periods of time is
Exactly.
really, really tough to
Also,
cope with.
because something else is going terribly wrong, right?
Yeah, yeah. Well, it hasn't happened quite yet. It's about to happen. And so the idea is, Gladys, we start to learn, possesses his parents, right? And the next morning, Alex comes down to like get his parents to make breakfast, and Alex tries to fight back against Gladys. What did you do to them? Stop, stop, like blah, 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 as much as a 10-year-old boy can do. And Gladys does this thing where she like makes his parents start stabbing themselves in the face with
Oh,
forks.
the worst.
And it's just so often, it's just like, I
Ugh.
can make them hurt themselves. I can make them eat each other.
Yeah.
Like, it's like
I
insane.
could
And you're
even
just like,
make them eat each other.
yeah. And so this is, the allegory, if you will, um, to Gregor's description of like what it's like to like live in a traumatic household ultimately. And this idea of like instantly Alex is helpless and beholden to this really
Yeah.
horrifying situation and dealing with trauma in a house. And this made me start to think of like the brood and like generational trauma and like the idea of like
Yeah.
the mother growing up with an alcoholic mother and how abusive it is. And it's just like, you're as a child, this is your parent and there's nothing you can do. I mean, it's proxied to an aunt in this situation, but it's the same idea. It's like a house with that kind of dysfunction is terrifying on a daily basis because you never know. It's the classic, like, when someone drinks at first, they're like really loving and they're fun to be around. And then, but 2 hours later, they're
Yeah.
suddenly abusive
They're a
and they're a live
demon.
wire. Yeah. You never know what's going to happen. And I
No,
think
it's true.
Gladys represents that, but Gladys represents something else, which we're going to get to too. But so suddenly Alex is forced to take care of his parents and he's buying soup. And I mean, here's the crazy thing. It's like, so Alex is in the midst of all this trauma and no one fucking notices. Like he's going to the grocery store and buying 20 cans of soup on a daily basis. Like what kind of community is this?
Exactly. And in fact, Justine's the only one who has some sense
Yeah.
when actually Alex is doing Gladys's bidding by the time he's under her thumb, and he has to get essentially all of the kids' name tags, which is something they've all touched, so that she can do her witchcraft and actually, beckon them all, or how would you ever say that? Summon them all to the
She
basement
enchants them. Yeah,
and
she
chants them.
enchants them. Yeah.
So that's actually Justine is there at that moment, and she's definitely got her antenna out. She's like, "What is going on here?"
Yeah. And so this is like, so this is this dealing with there's so many, when we first watched this, there were so many great Reddit posts that to think about and give context to Gladys as a character. She's basically a geriatric vampire, namely, she's just like working on the blood of workers and children to feed them, who otherwise there's decent people around them. And then wait, is this? Oh, what was this? No. Oh, here's a good one. It's like it's that. No, that's the end. I don't want to do that part.
There's some
Oh, here we
Stephen
go.
King Pennywise the Clown going on
Yeah,
there
yeah.
in this one.
Yeah, and it's a generational. This is the one that we've harped on, and this becomes like this idea of a generational hold, like that she represents, like the boomer generational hold has over America, and like not wanting to give up power. And even though it's implied that Gladys might go back centuries, hence the consumption statement, but the idea is that in this moment, she literally needs whatever. It's not the aura of the generation, and she puppets them like they're become helpless, right? You were made to fight against one another. Ultimately, she can take control of you and you can fight one another. And it makes me think of like basically, antagonistic politics of like, it's like you're really generally similar people. It's like you want to care for your kids, you want to go to the store and have some nice fruit and always be there and not worry about like costs of living and stuff like that. Yet through politics and regionalism and stuff like that, we suddenly are at the like beck and call of these people of extra wealth that just won't let go of power.
Are you thinking of anyone?
I'm thinking of Gladys.
Are you thinking of anyone
Gladys.
else?
Nope, just Gladys. Nope. That's all I'm talking.
You're not talking about the boomers, are you?
No, not at all. And so, that's kind of going on. And then as now we're where you're saying, where Justine and Archer have converged on the house. And what's so great is someone opens the door. I think it's Paul. Paul opens the door and he's a zombie. He beckons them to come in. Yeah. And Justine's like, what the fuck, man? Like, what's Paul doing there? Exactly. So they go inside and this is where like shit goes up, goes full horror. And they're fighting with zombie Paul and zombie what's the other one? James. And like the fight with James is so funny because like we have classic like contractor strength in Archer, and James is even though he's a zombified, never stopping gonna stop fighting, he's just a wimpy drug addict with like that probably weighs 150 pounds, and Archer just keeps tossing him aside, and he comes back and he tosses him aside again, and it's so funny. Practically, it's just ridiculous.
It's amazing. And it's also in that area, it's at that time that Justine is fighting with Paul, and she ultimately has to kill him to stop him.
Yeah.
And she ultimately kills James, who is on top of Archer, ready to kill him. But what happens in that scene is Archer realizes, because he's at the basement door, at the steps, and he looks back and he sees the kids. And so we have the big reveal that actually the kids are in the basement. And we kind of knew that because of James already, but this is the scene where like, Archer now has, all of his kind of, manic energy to try and find these kids has come to fruition, only to be prevented by who other than when he's down there. It's another great scene, and he's looking for Matthew, what happens?
Yeah, Gladys pops out of the corner and goes, ah!
Yeah, that's another crazy.
But forgetting at the same time, what's happening is Alex is upstairs and he's activated his parents against himself, and he doesn't. There's like Gladys has said, don't cross this line of salt. And the logic of things doesn't matter. And the ritual of possession is really well crafted and interesting to look at. And it involves like just something of that person and binding it on a stick and cracking it and using the witch's blood and all this stuff. So Alex has activated his parents, weaponized his parents against himself. And so he's fighting and fighting and fighting. And this is when he decides to cast his own spell
Yeah.
against. So he takes the same stick that was used to possess all the kids and he puts his blood on it, and he just somehow knows, and he activates Generation Alpha against Generation Boomer.
And it's wonderful. What a great ending to this movie.
I mean, it's literally so, and what's so wonderful about it is Generation Boomer instantly realizes it. And when Gladys hears the ding or the crick, she realizes like, I'm fucked.
Yeah.
And so she literally runs out the door, and all the kids in the basement that have been now weaponized against Gladys just start charging out. And it's just this epic scene of just flying through suburban houses and windows and doors and basically we have Gladys going the whole time, and the kids like pursuing, like, this is one of my favorite, this is the, if I can find this where's this quote, another great Reddit quote, it was here it is. Amy Madigan, so the Gladys is played by Amy Madigan, probably best known from Field of Dreams as Kevin Costner's wife in the film.
Uncle Buck, the girlfriend in Uncle Buck. I always want to give Uncle Buck a shout out.
That's true. That's true too. This is the quote: Amy Madigan screaming at the top of her lungs, pursued by through 5 houses by a bunch of also screaming, heat-seeking missile Terminator children, is going to live rent-free in my head until the day I die.
Yeah.
And it's totally true.
It's beautiful.
These heat-seeking missile kids tackle her, and Generation Alpha is like, fuck this generation, and literally tear her apart.
Literally, like Dawn of the Dead, zombies tearing apart the bikers in the mall tear apart. Yeah. Like, it was like, oh, he's gonna go there. Like, they rip her chest cavity, blood is spraying, and at the end, because Archer follows the path of destruction, which is a really great kind of follow-up to this, because he comes out of his spell, he stops attacking Justine, and then he's like, up right away, starts running after the kids, following their path, and you see the path of destruction. Then he gets to the front lawn, and he sees what they've done, and the blood is everywhere. It's really a macabre scene, and he finds Matthew, and he says, and I think it's a beautiful moment, I found you, right? Like, there's that sense of final reconnection. But the thing that's really kind of powerful about this ending too is, apart from that revenge, which is sweet as much as it is dark, is, the kid's voice from the beginning comes back.
Right. This is so important.
And they start talking about, like, Alex is, now, Alex's parents, are better, but now they're in an institution, right? And he doesn't have to feed them anymore. Someone else feeds them, but you get the sense that they're not talking and they've never come out of it in some ways. So there's a sense that long of a kind of enchantment does real damage. And the same is true, alluded to, for the various kids who were under enchantment for that month, that they too, even some of them, I think they refer to, are starting to talk now. And this seems like it's at least a year later, if not more. Nope. What else am I missing from that final child?
No, I think the idea is like, this is the back to that idea of the generational trauma here. It's like, he opens with, everybody tries to pretend like it didn't happen, right? That's the first narration. Yeah. He's like, 2 years ago, it happened. A lot of people died in really scary ways, and it was terrible. And if you ask anybody about it, they're not going to tell you. But the reality is, like, it's real, right? It's like they try to bury events and ignore effects. I'm reading some of the things because it's going to endure this kind of trauma, and whether we're thinking of it from the perspective of losing a child or having been living with an abusive parent, or enduring some sort of trauma from another space, it doesn't just go away. And that's where I like The Brood made me think of that stuff again. And I was like, oh, this stuff, man, I like horror for that does this stuff, right?
Yeah, and I
Yeah,
mean, if we think about it too, the reason why we watched Weapons so immediately after it came out is not only because I was really jazzed on it and I was begging
yeah,
you, but
right.
also because it was coming off of our summer 70s hot horror, whatever we
Family,
called that.
hot family horror. So you,
Hot
I
family
can't.
horror summer
It's your title.
70s.
You own it,
A
man.
hot summer 70s horror series where we did a whole bunch of 70s films, and we're talking about 70s and social anxiety and how those films highlighted it. We
Yeah,
thought Weapons did a really good job of that in a contemporary setting, of the anxiety that horror can bring to the fore. And that anxiety, like you said, is what do we do in the fallout after thoughts and prayers have gone out and the political kind of barbs have been traded, and we know that no one in power is going to do a goddamn thing to change the situation on the ground. What happens to those communities? What
yeah,
happens to those people who have to live in the wake of such disaster and horror? And I think this movie, people worry about the gun. I don't give two shits about the gun on top of the house. What I give two shits about is how it opens with that school with the flowers, and that's a scene that's immediately familiar of all these school shootings and all of this violence, and basically demonizing one side or the other around who's responsible and pointing fingers, versus all the people in those communities after it's said and done that have to live after that, who have to pick up the pieces, who have to try and make sense of it, and who have to arguably continue on alone, given no one thinks it's of utmost importance to try and change this trajectory. And I think that's the horror of Weapons, right? We
yeah,
can watch it, but the horror of Weapons is that kid talking about, what happens in the wake and trying to remind us as a 10-year-old might that, as much as we try and forget, as much as we try and repress or suppress, this happened, and this is still having its impact on our community. What are we going to do about it?
yeah. The scars are real, right? Both the emotional ones and the actual divots in their faces, the parents' faces.
Oh
All
my
right.
God.
Well, Weapons Reloaded, everybody. Thanks for doing it with me, Jim. I think this is going to lead into probably another set of stories about older adults dealing with their
Is this
even older parents.
is this going to give you more fodder to rail against the boomers?
We'll see. We'll see. We'll see.
I hope so.